Donald Trump heads to North Carolina today, including a meeting with faith leaders after a weekend of escalating baseless claims, veering off to new levels of vulgarity and profanity.
We can't stand you. You're a vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here.
The American people deserve so much better. Donald Trump should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. He has not earned the right. He's not earned the right. And that's why he's going to lose.
So Donald Trump encouraged his followers to shout profanity, crude remarks he made about a golf legend. So Trump is leaving no doubt that he will close his third campaign for president with an even more nasty and misleading message about his opponent, distancing himself more than ever from anything resembling a conventional campaign. NBC's Dasha Burns is covering the Trump campaign. Matthew Dowd is back with us. It's good to see you here, Dasha. 15 days to go.
15 days and counting.
Look, Trump is in North Carolina today after that weekend of, let's call it, unconventional campaigning. And I wonder if that's the strategy, more of the same, escalating, and what's his plan today?
Yeah, so I was there with him throughout the weekend. Today he's in North Carolina. He's making 3 campaign stops there. He started in Asheville. And look, North Carolina was a state that was like solidly red for the last several elections. The last Democrat to win was Obama in 2008, but now it is absolutely in play. So he's playing defense there. Over the weekend, though, the focus, and it really has been one of the primary focuses for the Trump campaign, is Pennsylvania. The Keystone State could really be the linchpin in this whole thing. He crisscrossed the state from Philadelphia to Lancaster to Pittsburgh throughout the weekend. And it's interesting that his closing message, the campaign wants it to be immigration and the economy. But in Latrobe County, he spent 12 minutes kicking off the rally with a 12-minute monologue about the famous golfer Arnold Palmer.
Who's from Latrobe.
Who's from Latrobe. So there's certainly a connection there. And Trump, of course, a big golfer, a big golf fan, and he knew Arnold Palmer. But it did turn a little bizarre when he ended up pivoting to talking about Arnold Palmer's, shall we say, anatomy, and describing reactions to Palmer in locker room showers. Not what his campaign wants him to be focused on, particularly in a state of that importance, and coming off of around, I mean, I don't even know how many days ago it was, but the DJ set that I was also witness to. I mean, when you talk about unconventional campaigning, this really takes the cake, Chris.
None of us can remember which day is which at this point in the campaign. And also, I should give Dasha credit for pointing out that young voters only know Arnold Palmer as a drink. But thank you for that, Dasha.
Now we know more than we ever thought we would know about Arnold Palmer.
Or maybe wanted to.
That's right.
Appreciate you very much. Thank you. So we played Trump's comments about Arnold Palmer a little earlier. And Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about them yesterday. So I want to play that part of the conversation.
Is this really the closing message you want voters to hear from Donald Trump? Stories about Arnold Palmer's penis?
Well, listen, I think that the headline that I read about the rally in Pennsylvania yesterday was the big question, and it's the one that Kamala Harris has not been able or willing to answer, and that is, are you better off now than you were under the Trump administration?
Why is he talking about Arnold Palmer's penis in front of Pennsylvania voters?
Okay, don't say it again. We don't have to say it. I get it. There's lines in a rally. When President Trump is at a rally, sometimes he'll speak for 2 straight hours. You're questioning his stamina, his mental acuity. Joe Biden couldn't do that for 5 minutes.
The New York Times writes that one of the truisms of Trump world is that being viewed as boring is a sin more deadly than being wrong. So is that how you view the Trump strategy right now?
It's funny. It's funny, Chris. He doesn't want to be boring, but he wants to be boorish, right? I mean, he wants to actually not only talk about locker rooms and a famous golfer in one, but also act like he's in a locker room when he's at a rally, in the way and manner which he talks, and the language he uses, and the indecency which he shows. I mean, it's unbelievable. I would guess that if you gave Truth Serum to any single Republican on his campaign or any single Republican in Congress and said, is this a good idea? Every one of them 100% would say, no, bad idea. Donald Trump can't help himself in the course of this. He's going to do this, I think, up until the final minutes of the campaign, because this is who he is. I think he amuses himself when he says this, because part of the reason he thinks is funny is I can say whatever I want to say, and people will keep coming to a rally, and all those people will keep showing up and keep applauding him. And so it's just who he is. It does provide a unique contrast with the vice president, who tries to say we need decency back in the country, we need to come together, we need to unify, we need to treat each other well, to Donald Trump, who is doing the exact opposite.
We've talked for such a long time, Matthew, about to what extent things are baked in with Donald Trump, right? So I was thinking about how yesterday Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were both in churches. They were quoting scripture. Tonight, Donald Trump will be at an event with faith leaders and Ben Carson, organized by Clay Clark, a guy who's a well-known conspiracy theorist. The Harris campaign keeps trying to point out the contrast. That's one of them, right? But is that what voters are looking at? I wonder what you think.
I mean, the problem, as you know, the problem we have in America today is that people are in silos of communication silos. And it's very difficult, but it's much more difficult today to reach people than it was when I was doing it in 2004 and in 2000 and in the 90s, because you could actually reach broad swaths of people who weren't isolated in their own confirmation bias silos. And that's part of the huge problem in America, which is why I think our democracy is at risk, not only because of Donald Trump, in my view, but also because people aren't getting out of their silos and they're only getting information that confirms their existing biases. And then that's especially true among people on the right and in conservative circles who have websites they go to, have news channels they go to, and everything reinforces the lies and the conspiracies that Donald Trump pushes. And even though the vice president may win and we may feel like people may feel like we can breathe a sigh of relief, that information silo problem is with us. And that's the big one that we're going to have to deal with.